Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly Q&A. Sandra Wallace here, the OCD, Anxiety, and Depression Coach. And as always, we start off our evening every first Monday of the month talking about mental health. Today, we are going to be talking about the differences, similarities as it relates to anxiety, OCD, and PTSD. So I'm going to pull up the slide and we're going to get started. And let's just start with the first question that came to us. How can I differentiate between anxiety and other mental health conditions like OCD or PTSD? Excellent question. And we're going to go over some of the differences. Okay. So the answers, now you're going to see that there's a lot of similarities with all three types of these disorders, but there are going to be some key differences. So I will talk about those as well. So we're going to talk about anxiety disorder to start. This is generalized anxiety and pervasive worry about various aspects of daily life. The symptoms, now there's various symptoms that can come along with anxiety, but when we talk about anxiety in general, there has to be persistent and excessive worry or fear. So it's not something that you are anxious about one day and then you're not anxious for maybe a week and then it comes back again. It's pretty persistent and ongoing. There's also a lot of restlessness at times and feeling on edge. People will often come to me complaining that they're really exhausted, they're tired, they're having trouble at work concentrating, they can't focus. Their mood swings fluctuate from being okay to irritable to sad to happy, all across the gamut. There's also at times muscle tension where people are so tense that they're tensing their muscles and they don't know how to just be in a natural state. And along with that often comes the sleep disturbances. So either having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. So intermittent sleeping, we call it, where they will sleep for a bit and then they're wide awake and their thoughts are racing and they have difficulty going back to sleep. And so it often results in people being up half of the night or going to bed early, but being up by midnight and then having trouble going back to sleep. Now, with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, this type of disorder is characterized by unwanted, intrusive thoughts, which we refer to as obsessions, and repetitive behaviors or mental acts, which we call compulsions. And these compulsions have a specific intent. They're intended to do these compulsions to alleviate the anxiety brought on by the intrusive thoughts or unwanted thoughts. The symptoms when it relates to OCD, I always tell people that the way to distinguish between anxiety, just general anxiety and OCD is with the OCD obsessions, they are reoccurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or images that are intrusive and wanted, as I just indicated, and then they have to perform a certain compulsion. Whereas anxiety, they don't necessarily have to perform a mental act or a behavior, outward behavior. They're not feeling compelled to do that, but their anxiety is still very prevalent. And some of the common compulsions are things such as excessive cleaning, checking, counting, arranging things in a specific order. We refer to that as symmetry, and there's many other types as well. The last one we're going to talk about is post-traumatic stress disorder. You may have heard it referred to as PTSD. And this one develops after exposure to a traumatic event such as serious accident, maybe an assault, a disaster, or people going off to war. And I think with a lot of times with PTSD, people don't even consider that to be what they're living with, because they refer to PTSD as, well, that's something that happens to people in a war, or maybe even as far as paramedics. But you yourself can be living with PTSD if you've witnessed an accident, or you've been at work and you've seen somebody else be affected by a traumatic event. So you have to understand, I'm always very conscientious to let people know that these three types of disorders can happen to anyone. And the symptoms when it comes to this one are often flashbacks, nightmares, severe distress when exposed to reminders of the trauma. So let's use an example in this case. They may be worried about having nightmares, or they may be thinking about the trauma prior to going to bed, and then they have nightmares about it. Or the nightmares can just appear out of the blue as well. So various different ways that this can impact a person. They may have flashbacks. I'll give you an example that a friend of mine, a colleague, was working, doing her thesis, and she was working with a gentleman, and they were having this conversation, and all of a sudden he got up and he started pulling the drawers out from her office, and she was asking, "Can I ask you what you're looking for?" And he responded with, "Well, there's bombs in here. We've got to find the bombs because they're going to kill us, and they're going to end up, as a result, blowing up the building." Now, there was nothing outward to trigger him, or there was no indication that she would have known this was going to happen. So often the flashbacks can result in outward behaviors that we don't necessarily know what's going on in their mind. The avoidance behaviors when it comes to PTSD is endless. People may avoid going to certain places like malls, they may avoid certain people, activities, anything that's going to remind them of their trauma. And the negative changes in thinking and mood, because of the trauma, they often feel hopelessness, they have memory problems, difficulty concentrating, difficulty maintaining close relationships. And the physical and emotional reactions, again, easily startled, not unlike with anxiety. People with anxiety will often be easily startled as well. They feel tense, may suffer from difficult sleeping and irritability or aggressive behavior. So what are the key differences? Well, when it comes to anxiety disorders, we talk about generalized and persistent worry about various aspects of life without that specific compulsive behavior or trauma-related triggers. With OCD, it's characterized by very specific repetitive behaviors, those compulsions that are performed to alleviate anxiety from those intrusive thoughts, which we call obsessions. And lastly, PTSD, there's that direct link to a traumatic event with symptoms centered around that re-experiencing that trauma. So there's avoidance and there's heightened arousal. But keep in mind that if you look at these, and you may be listening to this right now and you're like me, living with anxiety disorder and OCD, you can see that there's a lot of commonalities. And even with PTSD, there is anxiety, but it's related to something very specific. So what are the early warning signs of an anxiety disorder? We'll talk about some of these. Recognizing the early warning signs. I've said this over and over, and I'll say it again this evening. Early detection, early intervention goes a long way in helping us be able to live with our anxiety. So excessive worrying is one of them. these are one of the signs where there's persistent and excessive worry of fear about everyday situations, often out of proportion to the actual threat. There's restlessness and feeling on edge, a constant sense of restlessness, feeling keyed up. Someone might call it keyed up, just an uncomfortable feeling, and fatigue, feeling tired easily, even without significant physical exertion. So they may not even be doing anything but feeling very drained, both emotionally and physically. The concentration is affected where they're not able to focus properly. Their mind might just go totally blank, even though they know what they're supposed to be doing, or say for example, a job task, their mind might go blank and they just lose concentration and they're not able to focus on the task at hand. Now, when it comes to the irritability, it can be long lasting, it can be short lasting, but it often is noticeable by others, where people will say, "Why are you so irritable?" or "Why are you feeling like, why are you responding that way?" Another one is the physical symptoms such as muscle tightness, aches, or soreness. Often this will show up in physical ways such as tension in the neck or the shoulders. It might show up in feeling stiffness in other parts of the body or just a generalized aching. And the falling asleep, staying asleep, or experiencing restlessness, an unsatisfied sleep. And that makes sense because if people are anxious during the night, their brain is working overtime, often thinking about things, and they can't get to sleep and they can't settle themselves down. So there's that avoidance behavior we talk about. In each three of them, there's always you're going to see avoidance. So when it comes to anxiety, they're going to specifically avoid situations or activities that cause anxiety that can interfere with the daily life. So if you are living with anxiety, I'd like you to just pause here and think about things that you're avoiding. We don't always even necessarily realize it unless someone points it out to us. The physical symptoms, again, headaches, stomach aches, rapid heartbeat. Some people are very sweaty. They feel dizzy without a medical cause. And this comes often because of our fight, flight, or freeze. When the brain sends a signal to the rest of our body, we often want to do one of those things. And the dizziness and also the feeling of numbness can be another one in our fingers and toes, because when our body is kicked into high gear, we don't necessarily need blood to our fingertips and our feet, like our upper and lower extremities, because the blood's pumping really quick to the other parts of the body to survive. So that can be a really scary thing where people may feel like they're having a heart attack because there's numbness. And some of the symptoms may mimic a heart attack, and then that causes the anxiety to get even higher. And with all three, there tends to be a lot of social withdrawal, pulling away from friends, family, or social activities because of it. So what do we do? Now, if we realize that these are part of our everyday situations, what can we do to get help? Well, we have to remember that in all three of types of these disorders, there is going to be persistency and there's going to be interference with our everyday life. And it may start out in one area and affect us just in the work area, and then it can end up trickling down into our personal life, our relationship life, our everyday life. So this is a time where I would suggest that people seek out and obtain professional help. Ideally, we want to reach out for help before it becomes persistent, because if it's early detected, then we can get early intervention. but not everyone's able to do that, and that's okay. The main purpose of the education piece tonight is to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms and then start proceeding with reaching out to see where you can go to get the professional help that's required. The next question sometimes people ask me is can technology overuse, such as social media, exacerbate anxiety? And nowadays, in modern times, we have a lot of technology. And so obviously the answer is yes, particularly social media. This can really bring on a lot of anxiety that people would never think that it's possible, but I'm going to just talk to you about certain ways that it can. So let's look at social comparison. Viewing curated and idealized versions of other people's lives can lead to feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, and low self-esteem, which can also elevate the anxiety. Another one is fear of missing out. They call that FOMO. That's the acronym for that. Constant updates and notifications can create a sense of urgency and the fear of missing out on social events or important information, leading to increased stress and anxiety. So, what does that tell you? People want to become part of their society. They feel that if they're not a part of it, that it's going to impact who they are as individuals. The other one is cyberbullying and negative interactions. So this is happening a lot where there's a lot of online harassment, bullying, and negative comments that can have a huge effect on someone's mental health and eventually lead to anxiety and depression. And even though we're not talking specifically about depression, a lot of times those two go hand in hand. People develop anxiety, and over a period of time, it leads to depression. Another one is information overload. The constant stream of that info coming in, like when we think about negative news on the TVs and overwhelming amounts of content, that can create a sense of overload and also lead to anxiety. Sleep disturbances, for example, keeping our screens on, especially before bed or even in our bed. Some people like to keep their screens and their laptops plugged in or their cell phones right beside them on the pillow. Again, this can develop sleep patterns, poor sleep patterns, because the melatonin production that we do normally in the body is affected by things such as excessive screen time. And this, as a result, can lead to poor sleep quality. And if you're interested in learning more about that, there's a lot of good resources. As long as you're going with reputable resources, you can find out more information on the impact that these things have on one's life. The other one is face-to-face interaction. For some of us, we've lost that. We are over relying on the digital communication, and that can reduce the meaningful conversations that we have face-to-face with people. So if we take that one step further, then that leads to feelings of isolation and loneliness, and as a result of that, increase our anxiety. So as you can see, as we go through all these different variations and different situations that can lead to anxiety, I want you to just stop and think about what's happening in your world and if you can identify with any of these, and then what you can do to make a difference. Even if it's a small difference over time, as you make changes and lifestyle changes over time, it will hopefully lead to less anxiety, but we have to be mindful of it. And then there's the pressure to respond, the expectation to respond promptly to our messages. It's like we talk about urgency, enable pardon me, urgency to respond to something. We don't always have to respond. We can give ourselves permission to give a break from technology. So when the phone rings, just not thinking you have to run and answer it all the time. So Responding promptly to messages and notifications can create that constant elevated of anxiety. They're always on edge to answer something. So they're waiting for the next call, maybe, or they're waiting for the next ding for someone responding to a message or one of the social media platforms. These are all things that can contribute to elevated levels of anxiety. So managing technology used to reduce anxiety, the following strategies are some of the things that I would like to go over to show that there are ways that you can eliminate it. Okay, so let's talk about setting limits, establishing boundaries for screen time. So even saying to yourself, maybe 1 hour before I go to bed, I'm not touching the technology. I'm going to put it away. I'm going to shut it off, and I'm going to spend that time doing something else, something that's going to help calm my body to help get me ready for bed. The mindful use, being mindful of how and why you used your technology is another thing, focusing on positive and productive interactions. So if you're using your technology for work, that's one thing. Maybe using it a little bit of time for social media, but striking that balance. And sometimes even going as far as scheduling times of the day where you're going to be on your screen or off your screen. Curate your feed. Follow accounts that promote positive and well-being, and unfollow or mute those that cause stress or anxiety. So that sometimes might mean taking certain things off your phone or off your social media pages because it's just stirring anxiety within you, and it just leads to more anxiety in the end than less. Taking breaks is another important piece. So scheduling regular breaks from technology to engage in offline activities and relax. So what might be an example of that is putting our phone down and walking away from the computer, even if it's just for a half an hour. Doing that at the midday or mid-morning, mid-afternoon, taking a 20-minute break. And if it means setting a timer so that you're mindful of getting up and leaving. And I know that can be hard, even for myself. I get focused on a task and I don't want to stop till it's completed. But we need to do these little things in our life to be able to get big results. But it has to start somewhere. So I'm just going over some of the things that might be helpful to start to make those changes. And something that's important always is to seek support. If technology use is significantly impacting your mental health, then consider talking to someone. Talk to a coach, talk to a health professional for guidance and support, because we don't have all the answers. But if we start by just reaching out, then the people in the know, the professionals, can help guide us further to help us get started. Now, another question that people ask me, and I don't work with children, but I did want to cover this. How do I know if my child's anxiety is typical or something that needs professional intervention? So I'm going to spend a bit of time just talking about that. Determining if a child's anxiety is typical or needs professional intervention. Well, typical anxiety is situational. So this is where anxiety will show up in very specific areas of one's life. And so anxiety that arises in response to specific situations such as school. So a child may be high functioning at home, and as soon as they get in that social environment such as school, they start to shut down. And you can see different behaviors that they're exhibiting because they're in that environment. So it might be starting school, it might be meeting new people, might be taking tests. And this also can happen with adults as well, especially the taking the test. So if young adults or any age group, you're taking tests, it could be performance anxiety, where people feel really nervous about being in the environment when it comes to doing tests. So they may ask for extensions as an adult. As a child, you may ask for one-on-one help doing that test, or doing the test in a different room, or before the other students take the test, or after the test. We have to be creative on the means that are going to help us to be able to cope with the anxiety. There's also developmental anxiety, where some levels of anxiety is normal at different developmental stages. So think about a child when they're really young, as a toddler, they have separation anxiety, or as they age, they get fearful of the dark. I'm still afraid of the dark at times. When I go traveling, I often bring a nightlight, or I leave the light on in the bathroom, because if I wake up in the night and I'm in that feeling, that panic state, I can check into my environment much quicker than if it's really dark. There's times where I have a lot of anxiety if I wake up in the night when I'm traveling and I can't see my surroundings. So whether you're a child or whether you're an adult or anywhere in between, it's important to recognize your triggers that trigger anxiety and be able to work and implement things that are going to be helpful. There's manageable. The child is able to continue with daily activities, school, and social interactions despite their occasional anxiety. So the anxiety just peaks at certain times, but they're able to be higher functioning. They're able to get through the day. They're able to go to school and come home, and they're able to have friends at school. But there's still some level of anxiety. So signs that professional intervention may be needed, just like we talked earlier, is there's persistent anxiety. This is where it's intense, long lasting, and it's disproportionate to the situation. And what we mean by that is, yes, there could be a little bit of anxiety as it relates to that specific event or situation, but it's a little bit more than one would expect. And it's persistent. So it's going on and on and on. And this can go on for weeks. It can go on for months. It can go on for years. It can go on for decades. I've worked with clients that have been in social isolation for 40 years. That's a big part of a person's life. So unless you seek intervention, these types of anxiety can be devastating. And the avoidance behavior in children as well. They'll avoid being part of an activity or a sport. Maybe they like playing soccer or baseball, but they really want to do that, but their anxiety holds them back. And places such as events, maybe birthday parties, maybe going out camping, taking a hobby during the summer, they really want to do it. It's not that they don't want to do it, it's just that they can't bring themselves to do it. Okay, so different variations, even certain people around them could trigger anxiety, and this will interfere with the child's normal routine and development. Absolutely, because a lot of their decisions will be based on the environment, where they're going, what's going on, and it will shut them down quite quickly as well. The physical symptoms, just like in adults, we can have headaches, stomach aches, fatigue, and other physical complaints without a medical explanation. And so this will happen even with adults when adults will go into a doctor's office. I've had clients that come to me and say that they're having these chronic headaches, or they're having difficulty eating. And they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, you're fine. Like, there's nothing physical in nature. Your blood work's coming back well. There's nothing that's targeting any specific illness, disease. But when you start to ask a person the right questions, and I'm not saying the right questions, but the questions as they pertain to anxiety, then we can dive a little bit deeper. And people don't always ask the questions because they would never think to ask about anxiety sometimes. So I would suggest that people continue to ask questions, continue to pursue it to find out what it is exactly that they're going through. Okay. So professional intervention may be needed when there isn't involving sleep disturbances, significant issues with falling asleep, staying asleep, or experiencing nightmares that affect daytime functioning. And there's noticeable changes in behaviors such as increased irritability. There's a lot of clinginess. They might express themselves in tantrums because they can't tell us what it is they're feeling. So they may act out by crying or having a tantrum. And then there's even times they withdraw from family and friends. So we have to be able to ask the right questions. And not everybody knows what to ask. So it's good that you're here this evening, you're dialing in, you're trying to find out maybe, is this anxiety, is this not? And so it's really good to explore it further. There's also a decline in school performance. So again, the concentration can be affected. They don't want to participate or they drop completely out. Um, and they may have a drop in grades. They may drop out of school. Of course, that's not going to happen in the early years, but sometimes people will go as far as grade 10 or 11, and then they say, that's it, I can't go anymore. And they're so close to graduation, but they're not able to continue on because the anxiety is so high. So again, with this group of individuals, that professional intervention may be needed if there's excessive worry. There's that persistent excessive worry that is difficult for the child to control. It affects her ability to enjoy those activities and engage in daily life. And the impact interferes with the child's ability to function, not only at home, but at school and or social settings. So as you can see through all of this, anxiety will play an extensive role on a person in many areas of their life. So you want to seek professional help if your child's anxiety is persistent and it causes significant distress and it interferes with their daily function. This is where it's definitely going to be a time to seek that professional help. So let's consider some of the things that you can do in the meantime, because things aren't going to be resolved overnight. And so there's little things that we can do to help others going through anxiety. So talk to your child. Have that open conversation about their feelings and concerns to try to understand the extent of their anxiety. And this might be done in different settings. You may have to do it while you're walking alongside them, while you're going to pick up someone from another child from the school. Or if you're going out on an outing to a movie, you might just kind of talk about it in different environments. It doesn't have to be face to face at the dinner table. You can be doing other activities and still engaging in conversation. And sometimes that's even better because the child is doing another activity, so it doesn't seem so threatening to that child. A pediatrician, this is a great idea. Discuss your child's symptoms with their pediatrician to rule out any underlying medical issues and get recommendations for further evaluation. Now, a pediatrician is working in their lane of expertise. They've probably seen this many, many times before, so they will be able to help guide you with certain ideas and suggestions on how to overcome it. Seeking mental health, again, a psychologist is a great opportunity as well. A child psychologist, psychiatrist, or licensed therapist can provide a thorough assessment and develop that treatment plan, which may include therapy, counseling, or other interventions. So really the take-home message is find the people in the area of expertise that work with anxiety, and they will help be able to guide you and make suggestions. Not every professional, like every doctor, is going to know everything about anxiety. because they may not deal with it all the time. And that's no fault of theirs. It's just that that's not their area of specialty. So if it gets overlooked and you still feel their symptoms, continue to search out and you'll find somebody that will be able to help you. So early intervention can help manage that anxiety effectively and prevent it from escalating. That's really key, a key point in that. Even being able to get it under control. And then the professional support can help you with coping strategies and different tools to put in your tool trunk to manage the anxiety and support both you and your child. So the family is living happily and being able to feel like they're both being heard, seen, and helped in this situation. So those are some of the questions that came to us tonight. So I wanted to thank you all for coming out and sharing with us on our Q&A this month, the month of July. Happy birthday, Canada. So tonight is a special day in our country in Canada. So I want to also remind people that you can join our private Facebook group by searching for OCD Private Coach. You can follow us on our social media platforms by searching for the OCD Coach for valuable information about OCD, anxiety, and overall well-being. And we want you to stay connected and informed on your journey to better mental health. This also is a place, the OCD Coach is also a place where you can learn a lot about anxiety as well and depression. I will quickly just show you a couple of the books that are currently out for you, for people to reach out and purchase. We have our Stop Obsessing, Start Overcoming OCD Leaves Clues, and this can be ordered through the Amazon in your country. In Canada, you can go to www.amazon.ca and purchase your book. It's just a small book indicating different signs and clues as it relates to OCD. And then my second book is called OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, The 6 Secrets to the Deliverance from OCD. And this is more a vulnerable book that I put out about my own personal OCD and anxiety from when I was a child right up till more recently when I was able to get intervention back in 1995. And my life has changed, and I hope that people who are listening, that by buying this book, that they will be able to see hope and optimism and be able to know that their life can change too. And this is available at all the different Amazon locations. Depending on which country you are, you should be able to log in and purchase it. Okay. And the third book is a book that I was co-authoring with called Reach Your Greatness. And it's a little section where I have been honored to be able to share with other top leading experts in the field of being able to find your greatness and be able to live a life for extraordinary life. And so this book can only be ordered on my website, www.theocdcoach.com. And I just want to encourage you that if you're still curious about how we can support you, please feel free to reach out with a free 15-minute consult. If you want to scan this piece here, this barcode, that will lead you to our Calendly link where you can set up a free 15-minute consultation. And you can also do that through our website at www.theocdcoach.com. And lastly, I want to thank you. We've got some fireworks for Canada Day here, and we like to remind you that we are only an email away. We are there to support you, answer any questions you might have as it relates to anxiety, depression, OCD, one or all. We're there for you. So remember that every first Monday of the month, we have our Q&A. We hope you'll join us again at our next session, which is August 5th at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So just make sure you check your calendar on the local time zones. It's 6 p.m. And this is our link. Join our Zoom meeting, and we will definitely be able to send you an invitation now that we have your email. And then we also have an area where you can write your own questions and be able to submit those in advance. So all this information can be found at www.theocdcoach.com. We look forward to seeing you again, and happy Canada Day. Bye for now.